Yeah, so we have Jürgen Haas here. He's basically the maintainer of the ECA module. And maybe before I say something wrong about you, can you introduce yourself?
Hey Lukas, thanks for having me. It's a great pleasure to be on your podcast. Yeah, fine. I'm Jürgen, based in Germany, right at the south border to Switzerland, so not really very far away from where you are based. And I'm a co-founder of Lake Drops, one of the Drupal agencies. We are a Drupal Association certified partner, very proud of that. Really, our main goal is to support the Drupal community wherever we can. I started back in 2007, I believe, so that was Drupal 4.6 was the first one I started with. Something very different from what Drupal is today. Just to mention that for those who haven't seen the old age, we've been there. It has been tough, but it's even more brilliant today if you compare it to the old days.
Wonderful. So I contacted you to talk about ECA today. We met before at events, and I was following what you are working on in the open source space. I think you are maintainer of other modules as well. But today we are talking about the ECA module, and I quickly share my screen. I think the ECA module is super powerful, but if you are not very technical and maybe also not familiar with these kinds of tools, the ECA module can be a little bit confusing. So maybe, Jürgen, if you could pitch the module, what is it?
Right, so there are various ways on how you could do that. The first one is for those who are familiar with Drupal, especially with the old Drupal 7 days, there has been one of the most famous modules ever, which is called Rules. And I've been using Rules a lot in the past. It's a fantastic tool. It allows you to automate processes on your website, to put it in a very generic way. For example, if you want to be notified if somebody leaves a comment on a blog post on your Drupal site, then with the Rules module, you were able to actually listen to that event and then trigger some actions like, for example, sending an email to the author of the blog post telling them, look, there is a new comment for you. You may want to review that. And that was fantastic. And Rules had something like maybe 200,000 installations in the top times. But unfortunately, Drupal 8 was kind of a new platform, so it was re-architected from ground up. And a lot of great modules from the old days had challenges to actually migrate over to the new age, if you like. And Rules was one of them. I had a look into Rules many times in the years between, let's say, 2016 to 2020, because we always had an issue that we needed something like Rules. And I had in 2016 a client in the US where we proposed a solution very Rules-like, more like some people may know the Maestro module on Drupal.org. That is a visual tool where you can build workflows and automations as well. And we wanted to build something like that based on BPMN. BPMN is, outside of Drupal, is a global standard that stands for Business Process Modeling Notation. Those are those fancy little icons that show you how the workflow is actually built out. But the client back then in 2016 didn't actually buy into the idea. But then in 2019, we had another client in Switzerland, which is a global insurance company, and we maintained their intranet on Drupal 7 with millions of nodes and a really complex one, and hundreds, if not thousands, of rules. And we were asked to migrate that site over to Drupal 9. So we had another need for rules in a modern Drupal environment. And looked into it again, spoke to most of the maintainers of the Rules module, and we got the impression that It probably never really lands in the modern Drupal era, and it's time for a fresh start, new architecture and so on and so forth. So we proposed that to the client and said, look, there is rules. It's business critical to your website. We can't migrate the rules module, but we have an idea on how to build something similar from scratch. And they said, well, yeah, go for it. As long as you stay within budget and you can deliver in time, that's okay. And then we said, okay, but we would also like to do that as an open source module. So we want to share that on Drupal.org. And they said, yeah, that's fine. As long as you solve our problem with our money, that's okay if others can share that as well and also participate in the development process. So back to your question, what is ECA? It is kind of the rules module in the modern Drupal world. To be fair and complete, the rules module still exists, and I think since a couple of months there is also a stable release for rules on Drupal 10 and 11, but it's still the same kind of software that it used to be for the last 10 years. So it comes with some technical debt, I would say, whereas ECA has been architected in a very modern environment with a lot of experience in mind and on how can we build something that is complex, powerful, but we want to maintain it for the next, let's say, 10 or maybe 20 years moving forward. And I believe that we have delivered on that goal.
Yeah, wonderful. Thank you for the explanation and also a little bit about the history and thank you for your client also to agree on open sourcing it. I think it's just amazing what ECA actually is. And I just want to emphasize a couple of points you mentioned before. So as you said, ECA stands for Event Condition Action. We can discuss exactly what that means in a minute. But you also mentioned that there are other modules like the rules module and Maestro. And I used Maestro actually in the past, especially because it has this UI where you have a visual representation to build up these processes. I'm actually not sure if that's still maintained. I don't think so, or at least not as active as the ECA. But yeah, and also what you mentioned. So as I understand, the ECA module follows this business process model notation. So there is basically an international standard, the BPMN standard, which is fully baked into the ECA module. I mean, we don't go into very deep, but there is these ways to describe business processes. And as I understand, you use a library, the BPMN library, JavaScript library, which fully integrates with this notation. Is that correct, right?
That is correct. And I have to emphasize the value of that, not in terms of what it delivers technically, but from our experience, just because BPMN is something that business managers are aware of. They know what it is, they can read it. And what that means for Drupal projects is amazing, because suddenly we get so much buy-in from more stakeholders in a complex Drupal project, where if they tell us what automations they need, we build that with ECA and BPMN, and then we can actually show it to them, and it documents itself, and the client understands what's going on, and they can actually actively participate in the discussion, in the review process, and in the sign-off of the project. And suddenly customers feel much more part of the process because nothing is hidden or, in the background and it's PHP code and stuff like that. It becomes transparent and it's exposed to them and they can actually be part of it. We can't overestimate that effect that it has in a project when you talk to higher level members in a client project team.
Yeah, I fully agree. I think really this shows that Drupal is enterprise ready and capable to basically do enterprise stuff, right? And I think if you compare to other, let's say, Drupal competitors like Contentful and others, they don't have this extensive rules building, business process building capability. And we haven't talked about that, or we haven't mentioned it before. It's everything open source. So basically you can take it without paying licenses, especially for large organizations. I mean, there are closed source tools, business process management tools out there where you pay probably hundreds of thousands of money to actually build these business processes. And here we have an open source solution. Okay, Drupal is still a content management system. It's an application framework for web projects. But we have ECA as, basically kind of a process orchestration tool. And you can combine it with all the other capabilities that Drupal offers. And of course, you can customize it. I just went through the project page here, and it not only comes with some core, it actually comes with lots of sub-modules. And it integrates with many other modules. And you can even write your own events within the Drupal code and basically plug in your custom stuff with the ECA platform.
So maybe we should talk a little bit about the architecture of the solution, because that is, in my view, very important on how others can contribute to it or make it their own. As you say, you can customize it to, well, there is no limit.
Yeah, go ahead. I think there is some extensive documentation website somewhere, I think.
Okay. So
I think this one is go ahead.
First of all, I would like to make a statement that may be surprising to some people. Like, ECA is a black box module. It has no UI whatsoever. ECA is just processing instructions that are stored in config entities that tells the processor, also known as ECA, to which events it should be subscribing, and then what actions to take under what conditions. That's all it does. So it's black box. Why is that surprising?
If I interrupt you rather quickly, I think this is a very, very important concept everybody needs to understand. So basically, what we have is something like, okay, there is an event happening, and what could be an event? Just as an example.
An event could be that a new comment was being posted on your website.
So, for example, there is a new comment, and then, so this is happening, and then what happens? Just like from a broader context, what exactly happens?
Drupal core, out of the box, dispatches an event whenever a new entity gets created in the database, in technical terms. And the fact that Drupal core dispatches an event allows other modules to subscribe to that event, which means that module, that other one, gets notified that this actually happened. And then that other module, in our case ECA, but a lot of modules on Drupal.org are using those mechanics. They can then write PHP code to do something if that event has happened. And ECA is doing the same thing. It has all the PHP code already written, but it exposes that in a user interface with a separate module, we come to that in a minute, such that if you want to develop your workflow, like for example, you could say, okay, a comment was posted. If the comment contains certain words, I would like to notify the site owner about this comment.
Yeah. So basically there is an event, and then there's a if clause, the condition, and you can define the condition whatever you want. I mean, you can basically code your own conditions or even describe in the UI what the condition is, right? For example,
Exactly. Yes.
Right. Okay. So basically there is an if, which is actually the condition. And if that happens, then you can do an action.
So
Yeah,
those.
I'm not familiar with the notation. I think I should.
It's a rectangular.
And now the next is a rectangle, right? So this is then the action.
Yeah.
And then the action could be, for example, send an email with the comment.
Exactly.
With comment content to whatever email at email.com, for example. So this is the whole concept. So basically you have the condition, the if statement, the event at the top, and this is ECA, right? I think this is important to understand. When I first came in contact with ECA, I couldn't really conceptualize it from just immediately. I think it's really this event, something happens, then the condition, and then the action. And just in terms of numbers, for example, how many events do we have? Like, what is the spectrum of events?
I didn't pay you for the question, but I was preparing myself because I wanted to actually place that information. There are, as of today, 255 different events. There are 88 conditions, and there are, hold your breath, 780 actions available in ECA and contributing modules. So in summary, 123 plugins. Now, I think you put that really nicely on screen here. There are really only 3 building blocks. There is events, there is conditions, and there is actions. And because we have so many different events and conditions and actions, you have lots of, it's like Lego pieces, right? The number of different Lego pieces is limited as well. But if you have enough of them, you can build castles, you can build robots, you can build ships, you can build everything. And the same applies to ECA, because an ECA model can be as complex as you want to make it. So the number of elements that you use in an ECA model is unlimited. So you can just combine them as you want. You can have as many conditions as you like. You can have end conditions, you can have or conditions, and so on and so forth. With ECA, you can actually do as much as you can do with a programming language like, for example, PHP, just in a graphical interface. And that reminds me of a discussion I had with Randy Fay in Barcelona on DrupalCon last year. He said, look, I like the idea a lot, but please don't call it a no-code solution for non-programmers. Because ECA is like a programming tool. And I couldn't agree more. If you want to build workflows, you have to have a mindset which is pretty close to what programmers, software developers and so on do, but just with a different tool set.
I mean, I kind of agree, but I also disagree. I mean, of course, it's no code in a sense that you don't literally have to write code. You still have to have the mindset of, let's say, if statements and what is an event and what is an action. But I think just to not make ECA only for technical people. I think, of course, if you have an understanding of business process management, you mentioned it before, you can watch a model and then you immediately understand it. Maybe there are still some things, Drupalisms you have to know. What is, storing or creating a pre-save an entity or whatever. That's for sure a context you need. But I would not say it's not a no-code tool. It's a no-code tool.
It is no code, but it's not for a designer, for example. A designer can do things I could never accomplish, but also the other way around, a designer would probably struggle with building, just take the phrase loop through a list of entities. This is a phrase that some people have no idea what it means, although they understand the words, right? And that's okay, because, not everybody is like, black and white and if then that kind of thing.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. Certainly comes with complexity. And I think you made a lot of effort, or you put a lot of effort into also documenting everything. And maybe you wanted to talk about a little bit about some technical details and how to go on. I'm sure we cannot go in all the details, so this is probably something for another recording. But yeah, what can we do here on this documentation side?
Yeah, so there is the ecaguide.org domain where we publish the full documentation about ECA. The idea was that if it becomes successful, I was sure right at the beginning there are lots of people with lots of questions and we just don't have the bandwidth to answer them all individually. So that's why we spend a lot of effort in building documentation right from the beginning, and a lot of people are really happy with it. I personally know all the gaps in the documentation, so I know there is a lot to do still. And we do have people who just recently rang me and said, look, I would like to contribute to documentation. So there is good signs that this will grow very soon, very nicely. There are technical writers in the team that are really doing a great job. So we have 5 main sections in the ECA guide. In the top bar, you can see ECA, modules, plugins, library, and resources. Now, on the ECA section, we try to explain concepts, building blocks. What is in ECA, like, for example, tokens? That's a key component. Drupal people know what tokens are. They are placeholders in a text string. And we borrowed that concept and used tokens for what other people would probably call variables, right? So you can store something in it, a value or something, and then reuse that later in your process when you have to refer back to that one.
Just to make it clear for the audience, so now the new comment was created here, and then in the if statement, we can actually use this token variable and say, okay, this is the email or the comments, the actual comment, basically the text of the comment. And so we can use this kind of notation to access this information. And obviously it's not only this, but there is hundreds, thousands of tokens within Drupal. You can actually access that and combine and basically build up access data and build up the logic using these tokens.
Exactly.
Okay, cool, super.
Custom events is also something that's not well described yet, but in rules you had something like, I think it was called components, where you can build small routines like action chains that you can then refer to from other rules. And that is something that you can do with custom events as well. Like you build a model that says, send an email. That could be a custom event. Now, sending an email can be easy, but it can be complex as well if you want to do some sanity checks and formatting and so on and so forth. So you don't want to do all those steps every single time where you want to send emails. Instead, you have one custom event that says, send me the email. You pass on all the parameters for that particular email, and then you can call from other models this custom event with all the parameters, and this one is then doing the hard lifting.
If I understand it right, it's more like an action than an event, actually. So it's like an action. So it's like a custom action, but you called it custom event to say, okay, if a certain condition happens, then I can just prepare all the parameters and say, okay, do that. Is that correct?
It's actually, technically, it's an event, but
Okay.
that event is then followed by lots of actions that are doing something. So the event is always the starting point for something.
Yes.
Like a function call, right? That would be the equivalent in this case.
Yeah. Okay, makes sense. Yeah, I mean, what in this very simple example, obviously, what you will do is basically chain it. So there is something, and then you just say the action is firing another event, and the next event is actually sending out the email, which then itself has its own logic. And what you said is basically there are very powerful custom events which you can provide, which, for example, can encapsulate some complexity which you don't want to recreate with models every time, right?
Exactly.
Okay, that makes sense. Okay, cool.
Now, just as a side note, combine that with the idea of recipes in Drupal. That means you could write ECA models, stick them into a recipe, and then distribute that together so other websites or Drupal sites can actually make use of it. And if your models are real, clearly defined components that are reusable, that can be a real power tool for the community.
It's interesting. I don't know where it was. I followed the discussion that when ECA becomes this powerhouse for not only like these custom workflows you want to build, but actually Drupal internal functionality. Basically what a lot of modules exist because they do exactly one of these little processes. Yeah. So for example, there is this module, I think it's login destination. So when you log in, then you arrive not at your user page, but on whatever admin/content. And you had to write a module for that, also update the module, etc. And now you can simply create an ECA model. And as you mentioned before, there is even now a way to package these models and distribute it through recipes, for example. And as I understand, maybe you can then also talk about it. Now with the new Drupal CMS, the packaged Drupal core, we already use that functionality to basically deliver some models. And I think this example I was just mentioning is exactly part of the Drupal CMS distribution, as I understand, right?
And that's a good example because very often there is then a discussion, should we write an extra module, a real PHP code, to deliver something that's currently not there and we are missing? Or should we do it in ECA? And the fun part to me was in the Drupal CMS development phase last year. At the beginning, there were some skepticisms whether ECA is the right tool for that. And then we had some opportunities to showcase where it would fit really well. And then suddenly we all realized that if we do those little things with ECA, in the long term, we are preventing a maintenance burden on the Drupal CMS team. Because imagine next year Drupal 12 will come out. Now for every extra module that we create, we have to maintain that PHP code and make sure it's compatible with future Drupal versions. Whereas with ECA, that's just our part. We have to keep ECA up to date. But all the models that have been created for ECA, they still run. So it's only one module that has to be maintained, but a lot of functionality that goes with it to future versions of Drupal.
Yeah, I just open up. Sorry, go ahead. You wanted to mention something?
Yeah, that brings me to something. I have discussions with Drupal agencies quite a lot where project managers like the idea of ECA a lot. The programmers in the same agency think, well, it's actually great, but if I write custom code, I'm more efficient. And there is a battle between those two types of people in a project team. And I can understand both of them, and both are actually right. However, I would like to state that while the programmer is certainly more efficient writing custom code today, once they familiarize themselves with ECA, very quickly they will be as efficient with ECA as they have been with PHP. But even more so, if you think about the life cycle of a Drupal site, which is probably 3, 5, or even 10 years, maintaining custom code is what we all hate. If we take over a Drupal site from somebody who no longer maintains that site, the amount of time we have to spend to understand where something has been done, to understand the code, to realize that the code is probably not ideal and needs fixing and stuff like that, all of that could be part of the past. We don't need that anymore. With ECA, it becomes much more transparent and easier to maintain. So what I'm saying is the overall cost for a Drupal project, doing it with ECA, can be much lower than writing custom code. But that's an ongoing debate. You know, there are people who believe differently, and I appreciate that, and probably they are right in other circumstances as well.
Yeah, I mean, it's an interesting discussion. Should it be in code? Should it be through a no-code tool, whatever you want to call it? I think the trend is quite clear that when you can make it more visual, more accessible in a sense that, yeah, you can go here. I mean, I opened up now. This is just as a demo, so people actually understand what we are talking about. So this is Drupal CMS, a fresh installation. And so I go to configuration and then workflow and then to ECA. And this is enabled by default if you install Drupal CMS. And then it comes with this model. So if I understand it right, every line here is actually a model, right?
Correct.
And so now I can edit a model. So I go to here. And now I have this. Okay, I think I need to somehow plug it here. So I have this visual representation of that specific model, and it's quite a simple model. As I understand, there is an event, the user logout, and then an action back to login after logout. So this is the main concept. And just to come back to this discussion we just had, I think this is super visual for, let's say, consultants, whatever, project managers, but also for developers and even for the client. We actually had exactly this discussion in-house, and we started to adopt ECA for exactly this reason. So there is a lot of benefits about it. There is still obviously some tension with developers, but, and I think we also have to mention that, these models can be exported as configuration, and they are part of the code base. So if you have a continuous integration, even with testing and everything, so you have still this developer heavy workflow. It's not that you have to leave that in a sense. Obviously, if on a production side, if you start to edit models, then they are not part of the config or of the Git config in that sense, but there are techniques to fix that as well. And I mean, we're jumping around a little bit. Maybe we first go through that rather quickly, and then we go back, because I'm really keen on showing how it works a little bit. But maybe before we go there, we can go through these 5 elements here. So we had the custom elements and then the modelers.
Yep. So that reminds me on the architecture discussion right at the beginning of this talk, that ECA itself is just a black box. It comes with no UI. The UI parts that you see are separate modules. The idea behind that was, I like the idea of separating concerns in different modules because it makes maintenance easier, and then develop APIs between the two. And that's what we have done. ECA as the black box has an API for UI tools to sit on top of it. And I personally like BPMN a lot, and that's why we integrated BPMN as a UI. But I wouldn't be surprised if there are lots of people who probably even hate BPMN and say, I would never use that. Well, that's fine, then use another UI, and it talks to ECA in the very same way. And that's why there is a separate section for modelers. Camunda is actually the same piece of software as BPMN IO, just as a desktop tool.
I see, okay.
A little bit of history. That was the first integrated modeler that I used in the prototype phase. And then I showed it to some Drupal folks and they said, well, that's great, that's fantastic. It would be even better if the UI were integrated into Drupal. And I personally thought, well, yeah, that's a dream that will never happen. While we were still talking, one of those who were on the call, in the call found out that Camunda is a company that does these enterprise automation tools. They are very, very, very expensive.
Yeah,
exactly. The company has used the Camunda technology and put that into a JavaScript library, which is BPMN.io. So that guy said to me, look, there is a JavaScript library, you should have a look if that works. And I looked into it, and it had the same API as Camunda already, so it actually took only a day to integrate that into the admin UI of Drupal. And I was so excited. It was fantastic, you know. And from that day on, I thought, well, we probably don't need another modeler anymore because, you know, it can't get any better, I believe. Just for those who don't like BPMN, yeah.
That's so cool. I mean, just to make that clear for folks. So obviously this is the Drupal UI. And then within here, this JavaScript canvas is actually the BPMN.io UI. So here you can interact and building up these models through a UI. But the ECA core, if you want to say it like that, has no UI whatsoever. And it's basically just interacting with these events and stuff. So it's very lightweight and also super performant. I think this is also important to mention that I think once we met, I asked you, well, I was also a bit skeptical. Is it actually fast? And then you said, okay, you can basically have thousands of rules and it will be still super fast because everything is super lightweight. And that changed my mind a little bit. I thought, oh, okay, that seems to be interesting. And so that's cool.
There hasn't been a benchmark that showed the difference whether ECA is enabled or disabled. So really, like, you know, custom code comes with some weight as well. Like custom code, subscribe to an event and then make decisions and do something. And ECA does exactly the same thing. And we had, I would like to mention another company here and the benefit of open source. As I mentioned, our client at the beginning agreed that we do that in open source. And the beauty was 3 months into the project, Open Campus, a company in Munich, they do an open university distribution with Drupal. They had exactly the same problem that we had, and they hired a great developer who should have built something to migrate rules over to Drupal 9 back then. And he found my ECA work in the early days, and we talked to each other, and we agreed to join forces. So that other company came in and helped us moving faster and make it even bigger. So without them, we couldn't have been where we are today in that period of time. So that's great that open source works. Our client was happy, another company was happy, and now the community is happy with what came out of it. The developer I would like to mention is Max. He used to work for Thunder, the distribution. He is a fantastic software engineer, and he spent so much time in actually all the caching mechanisms and optimizing the code wherever possible. So it's a credit to Max that ECA is so powerful and lightweight and doesn't bring any negatives to a Drupal site, really.
Yeah. It's amazing story. It's an open source story. So once you start publishing it, people join forces. And now, as I said before, it's part of the Drupal CMS, one of the key initiatives for pushing Drupal forward. It's not only, people might think, well, what happens if Jürgen is no longer part of the Drupal world? Well, it's part of the Drupal community anyway. And obviously you are one of the power horses to push that project, but it's already part of the community and it has a lot of wide adoption.
Yeah.
And this is thanks to open source. I think this wouldn't be the case if you kept it kind of closed source.
Yeah.
Thank you to you and Max and all the other contributors. I think we cannot say that enough. Yeah. Let's go on here. So there is the plugins also. And this is, I think, the plugins you were mentioning before, right? So are all these like events and conditions and actions. Is that right?
Correct. Absolutely.
Okay.
That section in the guide is actually containing those 1123 plugins. They are organized in modules that actually provide those plugins. So ECA content is a fantastic example. So you can enable just those modules that you need. So you don't have all the plugins on every Drupal site, just those that you really need. And then you can see just in ECA content, there is already a fair list of events that get dispatched all the time when Drupal is doing something. For people who wonder where the events are coming from, to be honest, Drupal in content is not dispatching events yet. It's still calling hooks. So hooks is one of those things that are currently migrated over into object-oriented pieces, but so far they are still serialized hooks. And ECA, we just listen to all the hooks and then dispatch events by ourselves. Then we have some conditions there and a lot of actions in the content area. And yes, the documentation shows you all the provided tokens that when this event gets dispatched, there is an event token that contains some context information. There is an entity, like this one is the pre-save content entity. So we already have a variable in memory, which we call a token, that contains the entity so that we can look into field values, other properties, status information, and so on and so forth. And we can not only read data from that entity, we can also modify data in that entity before we probably save it again.
Just to come back to the example we had before with a new comment. So as I understand, it would be exactly this pre-save content entity. Then I can say, okay, if that event happens, then, and if the entity type is a comment, then you can also check it with the condition. Where is it? Is new, I guess.
Yep.
For example, is new. So if that is new, it's a new comment, and then you have an action, which is probably some mail send or so from another plugin, I guess. And then you can basically formulate that. So this is the main mechanism. And for sure, you have to kind of know what these events are. And, this is what I mentioned before. These are the Drupalisms you have to understand. What is insert or pre-save or load and blah, blah, blah. And this is what you maybe still have to be a little bit of a developer to actually understand what's going on behind the scene. But this is all documented in a very nice format. And even if you are a non-developer and you've invested a little bit of time, maybe with help of a developer, I'm sure you can understand it. And you can also look up existing models, see how they are built. You can duplicate them and adjust to your custom needs. Right?
It happens every day. There are so many people who are achieving so many great successes with ECA. I'm actually surprised, to be honest. Now, there is a link between your Drupal site and the ECA guide. If you probably go back to your Drupal ECA canvas for a second, you have selected that back to log in after logout. If you select that action or the event, it doesn't matter, one of the two. Now you want to learn more about that one. On the top right in the property panel, just a little, that one, that gets you to the documentation page of that one.
Wow. So even if I don't have the full context, I can then open up with one click the documentation and I get all the details I need to understand how that actually works. Okay, that's so powerful. Wow.
And then a question to future users: if you feel like the documentation for that particular one is not good enough, just let us know and we're gonna improve it. You know, if you tell us what's missing, then we can understand what we need to write for other people to make it more obvious moving forward.
Yeah, shout out to the community, help contribute and help improve the documentation. Even as non-technical people, I think this is a good contribution opportunity.
Yeah. And then you mentioned the library examples, like where people can learn from, and that's why the fourth section is actually the library section, where we provide, I don't know, maybe some 50 or 60 examples. Yeah, the first load of the JavaScript is not good, so we have to reload once.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
After that, all the others work well. It's just the first one that doesn't properly load. So yeah, we visualize the examples, describe what they do. We have a list of events and actions at the bottom of that page for each model to tell you what building blocks have been used to actually get to that result.
Yeah.
As well as if you go to the process form event, for example.
This one? Yeah. This one, yeah.
If you click on that, in the right column, you now have backlinks and you get a list of all the sample models that are using that event. So that's how you can navigate through the ECA guide. Like, okay, process form, that looks interesting. What can I do with that one? And then you straight get into the example and it explains what it does and how it works. And you can download that and import that into your Drupal site to actually build on top of it, use it to learn from it, whatever you would like.
So basically, just to demo that, I go then to the import. I just downloaded this specific model, and now I can, I can select. For some reason, my browser just froze, but so basically, it's exactly that. I can now upload it, and then it will be there. Which one was it?
Message on top of the screen has a link to it as well.
Content validation, and boom, I have it, and I can now adjust to my needs if I like that, or even for testing and playing around with it. Hey, this is super cool. I didn't know that it's so advanced. I think I wrote you on Drupal Slack many times for some use cases I didn't know to do, and they said, go on the website. And then I went to the website and I was a little bit confused, but now I understand it. So this is super cool. And also this back and forth linking. Yeah, it's very interesting. And I think from here, even with these 50 something examples, I think this really help you kick off your own ECA models. And I assume that this is only growing, right? So it's only growing from now with these models. But these are, the, let's say, the official documentation examples. Is there some kind of repository for models already? I mean, I'm just thinking loudly. So why not have something like a search inside the ECA? Import model, and then you search for a model, and then you have it, or a website to download and upload?
Yeah. Well, we built that library before recipes became a thing in Drupal core.
Yeah.
That's why we have built an export function which creates a tar file which can then be imported again. But, and you can see that here, you see composer require.
Here.
We now also publish all the samples as a composer package, which is available from packages.org. So you can now just go composer require namespace and name of the library and get it that way. And of course, the next logical step will be make all those recipes available in Project Browser, because then you have that search functionality that you were just talking about. And then we have a global library of recipes, some of which are ECA related, and you can build your automations that way.
Yeah, what you're saying is once you have your Drupal site installed, then you go to extend, and then there is this new project browser. And then, for example, here I search for ECA, blah, blah, blah. And then you have a description of the specific ECA use case or ECA model use case. And then you can simply install it. And then through the mechanism we already have from the broader Drupal ecosystem, we have exactly this functionality I had in mind before. Super cool. Wow. Nice. Okay. I think that helps a lot of people to better understand the documentation. Interesting.
And then that is, well, there are a couple of logos that people can download and use for promotion or whatever. Tutorials and videos. The idea at the beginning was I would like to collect everything that I can find in public about ECA when somebody writes a blog post or whatever, and collect it here. But I can't catch up now with all of that happening because it's every day somewhere and I just lost overview. But if you have something that you want to promote, which is ECA related, just send us a link and we put it on the ECA guide as well.
Yeah, I think it's also important to kind of, everything is evolving very fast. I mean, I just had a chat with Jamie, who's one of the leads of the AI module. Some people wrote stuff, let's say a year ago or half a year ago, which are already, outdated or not up to date to the latest documentation. But anyway, I think also shout out to the community. If you have something, send it to Jürgen and he might add it also to the resources tab on the ECA documentation. Okay, nice. So now let's use the last couple of minutes to actually build a model, and maybe we can just create the new one from scratch. Why not?
Yeah.
So okay, maybe we can create this comment example we just had before. So maybe you guide me and then I try to replicate that. So what do I need to do?
Now we have a blank canvas, and if you want to do some housekeeping, then go to the right sidebar first. There is a general section where you can actually name your model first. Give it a name like comment
notification. On new comment.
The ID is auto-generated, and that is later on the file name of your config entity. But you can also make that something more meaningful if you like, or you leave it as it is. That's all. You have a documentation section there as well, where you can actually write down what this model is doing. So for other folks finding that later, You don't have to explain it. It comes with the model automatically.
Okay.
But that's just a little bit of housekeeping. Now let's start building functionality. And on the top left corner of the canvas, we have the 3 building blocks, like the circle is an event and the rectangle is an action. You can click on the circle, on the event, and drag that into the canvas and drop it somewhere. Exactly. Then you can give it a name as well.
So here I would assume I just say new comment, for example.
Correct. And now we provide each of the events that are available on this Drupal site as so-called templates. And there is the template section and a select button, and if you click on that, you get a huge list of all the events with some search functionality on top of it. You mentioned the pre-save event before when we were in the ECA guide. That is one possibility, pre-save, so just before it gets saved, and then check if it's new. But what you can also use is the insert event, like instead of pre-save, use insert.
So this one?
The top one, insert content entity. That is an event that's dispatched when a new one has just been created.
Okay.
On the right, in the property panel, you then have additional, well, what's below the template is some not nicely formatted HTML text, which is equivalent to the ECA guide content. I would ignore that for now and close the template section again. The limitations come from that BPMN.io JavaScript library, and they haven't got a nice framework to add extra text. So that's a bit of a weakness right now.
Yeah.
You can either, with that event, listen to any new entity or just to specific ones. And we want to listen to a new comment.
I think I don't have comments installed, but let's just assume I have a new article, for example.
Okay, yeah, that's good.
So now I said, okay, new article, let's rename it, new article, and then I only want to listen to that event if the entity is article, right? If I said it right, correct.
That is subscribing to an event. Another side note, if you want to do something like that in PHP, you would have already created 5 different files with a lot of boilerplate text and then creating your subscription to that event. Here it is just that little circle with a little bit of configuration, that's all. Now, what should follow next? So for that, select the event again, and then you have on the right a subsequent, and there is the action symbol, which is the rectangle, and if you click on that one, it created an action which is a successor to the event. You can give that a name as well, either show message or send email, whatever you like.
Okay, so just for sake of simplicity, because I think I didn't set up the mailing, show message would actually show the Drupal message at the top, something like that, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so the use case we're going to build, new article is created, and then we show a message at the top saying, hello, Lukas and Jürgen, as an example, just as a demo.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So now we have to tell this action what it should actually do, and there is the same on the right. You have templates with a select button, and there you can search for message.
And just to make it clear and kind of combine it with this, so we added an event, and now we are actually configuring this action, right? And the condition was, from my understanding, part of the event configuration, or is there an additional way to add configurations in between?
We currently have a condition that always returns true or yes. The condition is, maybe you select this action first, then we Yeah, that one. Right. Good, so that's hard-coded. That's okay for now. Where could I apply a condition now? Conditions are applied to the link between the two elements. If you select the arrow between the event and the action, this is the path that it takes, and on that path you can attach a condition. And you find templates for those conditions that are delivered by the system as well.
So we can say if the article title is hello, then we only fire then the message. So how would I do that?
That is comparing two values. That's the second from top.
Okay, to scalar, no.
Scalar is everything that's not complex, like a string or a number or something simple.
All right.
It's a technical term. We could probably do better on that. Now, the configuration form here is a little bit more complex. What we would like to do is take the title of the entity and see if it contains the string hello. The first value is the title, and that is where tokens come into play. There is a token browser, but we don't use it for now because we know anyway how that goes. So this is a bracket to open, entity : title.
I mean, this is something we as Drupal developers know, that the token is like that this is exactly what you mentioned. A designer or front-end developer maybe doesn't know how to access this value, but as you said, there are token browsers where you actually can look them up, and the more you use that system, the more you know basically the variables. Okay, so and then now we basically build this logic. So if entity title contains, for example, hello, then it goes through. So this is basically the condition between the initial event condition and then the action, right? And then I can even define if it's case sensitive or no. I can even negate. So okay, so it's basically building the logic, right?
Absolutely, yeah.
Okay,
now, for non-programmers, what does negate a condition mean? In this example, it would mean continue if the title does not contain hello. That is what negate means.
And just for my understanding, if I got it right, I can even add multiple of these conditions, right? So I could say, okay, if it's hello, if it's hi, etc. And so basically, it's not only one rule, but actually it can be 10 or even hundreds if you want.
There is no limit.
Yeah, I see. So I think it should already work, no?
Yeah, if you hit the save button, probably.
Okay, so we need to hit save. So my model is now there.
And actually, let me emphasize that hitting save is all it takes. You know, there is no compilation, there is no cache refresh or anything. It just works right away. Yeah, give it a try.
Say hi on new article. So now I create a new article. I say hello there. And then let's see if that works. Hello, Jürgen and Lukas.
That was easy.
Hi there. It shouldn't show anything. Wow. Very nice. Okay. I see. Okay. Yeah, I see where this is, you know, the capability of such a tool is endless, I would say. Yeah, super powerful. Interesting. Yeah, I don't want to make it longer than necessary, but maybe a more complex thing just to show or demo it is, so this is about duplicating content. And I don't want to go into details, but for example, this is, you have multiple events and then multiple ways to actually do stuff within one model. So it's not just this very simple use case we just showed. You can actually create one model around one business process which has several entry points, several conditions, and also several actions out of it. And you can kind of combine that in one model.
Yeah.
Just one thing, I'm just thinking loudly.
Do you want to show that duplicate content in action? Because I think this is one of those that amazes people, that there are so many node clone modules and what else. They come with a lot of overhead. This is all it takes to clone a node, right? So if you go to the front page of your Drupal CMS, to that.
Okay, go back to site, yeah.
Or go to home, that one. There is a duplicate button. So ECA, with that little model that we just saw on screen, creates this tab, this extra tab. And if you click on that.
Which one is it? The tab, you mean, yeah. Okay, the tab, yeah, okay.
Yeah. And if you click on it, you get a node form which creates a new page. It's not editing the existing one, it creates a new one. And all the fields are pre-populated with the values from the other one. And this is so powerful. You don't create a clone and then go to edit. You just go to the edit form with the cloned entity, which is not saved yet. So you can make your modifications before it gets initially saved as a new entity, as a new node.
Yeah, and so it's actually, it's not easy. Basically, you have to make sure that this tab shows up. Then you have to make sure that based on the entity's configuration, you basically copy over the values, which is a generic thing. And this is, everything is done within that, right? So that's... And as I understand it, if, for example, if I want to just change the label of the tab, how can I do that? I think it's here, right? So I can duplicate now. I hit save, and then I go back to the front page. And oh no, it didn't work. I had to...
I think the tabs, the routing is probably one of the exceptions where you need a cache refresh.
Okay. All right. Yeah, the tabs are for sure cached quite heavily because they don't change that often, right? It's not that. Let's see that if that works. Yeah, duplicate now. So okay, interesting. Yeah, cool. Yeah, I mean, okay, so maybe we can kind of wrap up what we. Thank you for telling me about ECA. I think it's certainly interesting. So we covered what is actually ECA. I tried to kind of visualize it. Hope this helps. We went through the documentation. I will add all the links to the video description. And one thing actually I wanted to talk with you, maybe just a couple of minutes. What's the future of ECA? There is some cool stuff in the pipeline.
Well, ECA itself is kind of feature complete, if you like, but there are every day a dozen new ideas on new events, conditions, and actions. And building a new plugin for ECA is often really a matter of minutes, because ECA provides a code generator. So if you say, I want to build a new action plugin, you just call a drush command, drush generate ECA : action, and you get an action plugin file which has all the boilerplate in place, and you just type in the logic of what the action should do. It's very easy, very simple, can be done very quickly. Then what's on the agenda as well is the BPMN IO interface is not fully accessible at this point. So this is something we need to work on, hopefully in cooperation with the maintainers in Berlin who are doing that. So that is a major task. And another one is then, how can we make the work in the UI more intuitive. Like you touched on tokens before. Those who know Drupal well, they know what tokens are. They probably even know how to write down entity, title, and more complex stuff. But a lot of people don't know that. And we really hope that we get millions of new Drupal users soon. So we have to provide an interface that guides them through that process. So we do have some ideas on how we can do that. And probably even AI is going to help us in regard to that. And I have seen, there is a module called AI_ECA written by Jesper in Belgium. This module is able that a user in front of Drupal tells the AI agent that please create an ECA model for me, which puts a message on screen when there is a new article, but only if that title contains hello. So you would write down that task for the AI agent, and that AI agent creates the model, what we have done manually now, fully automatic. The result of that is an ECA model that you can still open in the UI and then modify. Wow. I've seen it working. It is mind-blowing. It's just amazing.
Yeah,
but that's only one part where AI comes into play. We are currently discussing, like with Jamie that you had on your podcast a couple of days ago. There are ideas like, those 780 actions that ECA already provides. The AI agents could utilize them as well. Like if the AI agent wants to create an entity, why should they write the code to do that in AI agents? Whereas there is already an action plugin that has an interface, they could just call that. Now, the idea is, if currently ECA knows all about those action plugins, an AI agent doesn't. So can we provide metadata to those action plugins so that a machine can actually extract the meaning of that action plugin to know what it's supposed to be doing and what parameters it requires?
Yeah, totally makes sense. I mean, this is like a function calling, right, in AI, and then you already have that like this well-defined interfaces, and the only challenge now is how can this be made accessible for the agents. But yeah, this is totally makes sense.
So yeah, those are probably the major parts on the roadmap right now, apart from, for example, BPMN has another building block which is called Gateway. We don't fully support that yet. This is something we want to build in. What it does is something like in our example we had before, there is a new article. If the title contains hello, then do this. If the title contains not hello, but hi, then do something else. And in all other cases, when none of those conditions applies, then do something different again. And gateways help us modeling stuff like that. In programming language, it would be like if, and else. And that can be
a switch, like a kind of construct. Okay, I see. Okay, yeah. One use case you haven't mentioned, I'm actually not sure how that evolved the last couple of months, is actually calling AI LLMs. So in our case, I create a new entity, and let's say I want to generate the teaser of the article, teaser text of the article. Then I fire the body field to the LLM with an instruction, and then it comes back and you save it to the teaser text. I think this is there, right? You can use it.
This is also available, like the AI agents are providing their own action plugins so that we can call functions from within the AI.
I see. Wow. Okay, so yeah, we covered a lot, and I think thank you again, Jürgen, for bringing that up and pushing these things forward. I'm sure you will be at some Drupal events in the next months. Are you in Atlanta, actually?
I'm going to Atlanta, and I'm also going to Dev Days in Belgium, just, I think, April.
April, a Drupal Mountain Camp in March.
You know what? Mountain Camp and DrupalCon are so close together, I can't make both. So that's a bit unfortunate, but next time I will be there again.
Perfect. Okay. Yeah. Thank you again. And until next time, I think there is a lot of stuff we can cover in a maybe future call. And see you soon. Bye bye, Jürgen. Thank you.
Thank you, Lukas. Bye bye.